or empowered the poor. In this case, many would believe further taxing the rich, although if you deep dive into the numbers, there is relief there too, especially in the automobiles, where it is 40% slab but no compensation cess. So that means about 5 to 7%, in some cases 10% relief for the rich also in the luxury car segment. Certain segments which are going to be taxed. If you have a sugary tooth or a sweet tooth, then you'll pay more for carbonated drinks, for caffeinated drinks, and also for the caramel popcorn in terms of GST. But you'd also pay for tobacco, or pay more for alcohol, pay more for gutka and cigarettes. So all of that is going to be taxed more at the higher end at 40%. Fuel is not yet being spoken of, but the automobile sector ahead of the festival season, it's a huge amount of encouragement and impetus for the middle class and Bharat to go out and consume more. Is it going to encourage the manufacturing sector? We'll have to wait and watch. But let's go straight across and try and understand more about this from Shri Arvind Virmani, who will be joining us in a bit. But before that, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, just a short while ago, while Rahul Joshi was in conversation with Piyush Goyal ji, spoke about the biggest reform, that is the GST reforms, and said this is going to be a huge step towards a Atmanirbhar Bharat. Listen in.
साथियों, कल जो निर्णय हुआ, ये कितना सुखद है, इसका असली प्रभाव तब और पता चलेगा जब आप जीएसटी से पहले के टैक्स दरों को याद करेंगे। कभी-कभी क्या होता है, पता ही नहीं रहता है कि अच्छा पहले ऐसा था, और इसलिए कभी-कभी पहले की चीज याद करते हैं तब पता चलता है यहां से यहां चले गए। साथियों, साल 2014 से पहले करीब करीब हर सामान पर उस समय की जो सरकार थी, उस समय कितनी बड़ी मात्रा में टैक्स लिया जाता था पुरानी सरकार में। 2014 में मेरे आने से पहले रसोई का सामान हो या खेती किसानी से जुड़ी चीजें हो या फिर दवाइयां और यहां तक जीवन बीमा भी, ऐसी अनेक चीजों पर कांग्रेस सरकार अलग अलग टैक्स लेती थी। अगर वही दौर होता, अगर आज आप 2014 के हिसाब से होते, तो आपको 100 रुपया की अगर चीज कोई खरीदते हैं तो 20-25 रुपया टैक्स का देना पड़ता। साथियों, कांग्रेस की सरकार ने कैसे आपका मंथली बजट बढ़ाया हुआ था, ये कोई भूल नहीं सकता है। टूथपेस्ट, साबुन, हेयर ऑयल, इन पर 27% टैक्स। आज आपको याद नहीं होगा, लेकिन आप देते थे। खाने की प्लेट, कप प्लेट, चम्मच, ऐसे सामान पर 18 से लेकर के 28% टैक्स हुआ करता था। टूथ पाउडर 17% टैक्स, यानी रोजमर्रा की ऐसी हर चीज पर उस कांग्रेस के जमाने में इतना सारा टैक्स लगता था। कल भारत सरकार ने राज्यों के साथ मिलकर के एक बहुत बड़ा निर्णय किया है और बहुत महत्वपूर्ण निर्णय है। अब जीएसटी और भी ज्यादा सिंपल हो गया है, सरल हो गया है। जीएसटी के मुख्यतः 2 ही रेट रह गए हैं, 5% और 18%। साथियों, 8 वर्ष पहले जब जीएसटी लागू हुआ तो कई दशकों का सपना साकार हुआ था। तो ये चर्चा कोई मोदी प्रधानमंत्री बना उसके बाद नहीं हुई, उसके पहले भी हो रही थी। काम नहीं होता था, चर्चा होती थी। ये आजाद भारत के सबसे बड़े आर्थिक सुधारों में से एक था। तब देश को अनेकों तरह के टैक्स के जाल से मुक्ति दिलाने का एक बहुत बड़ा काम हुआ था। अब 21वीं सदी में आगे बढ़ते भारत में जीएसटी में भी नेक्स्ट जनरेशन रिफॉर्म की आवश्यकता थी और उसको किया गया। मीडिया के कुछ साथी इसको जीएसटी 2.0 के रूप में कह रहे हैं, लेकिन असल में ये देश के लिए सपोर्ट और ग्रोथ की डबल डोज है। डबल डोज यानी एक तरफ देश के सामान्य परिवार की बचत और दूसरी तरफ देश की अर्थव्यवस्था को नई मजबूती। नए जीएसटी रिफॉर्म से देश के हर परिवार को बहुत बड़ा फायदा होगा। गरीब, न्यू मिडिल क्लास, किसान, महिलाएं, स्टूडेंट्स, नौजवान सभी को जीएसटी टैक्स कम करने से जबरदस्त फायदा होने वाला है। पनीर से लेकर के शैम्पू साबुन तक सब कुछ पहले से कहीं सस्ता होने वाला है।
Let's go across to Monica Harlan, author and financial educator, Professor Santosh Mehrotra, economist, and PK Basu, economist, joining us. My namaste and Jai Hind to everybody. Thank you very, very much. Santosh Mehrotra ji, if I may start with you, how important, significant is this? There are estimates which say that nearly 5.5 lakh crores worth of additional impetus to the GDP should happen because of these reforms. But will this fuel the Bharat story further?
Well, for that, we'll have to wait to see. The first thing that we have to think about is what the finance secretary told us, that 48,000 crores will be lost in terms of revenue by the government, by a government which is already at 82% of GDP in respect of debt, a rise from about 5 years ago when it was under 60%. So we've got to. So the scope for borrowing is limited, considering that the government is also on a fiscal consolidation path. And we also know that the corporate income tax rate was reduced about 6 years ago. And we also know that the PIT rate was changed. Now, the point is that the CIT reduction 6 years ago has not really resulted in an increase in private investment. And the personal income tax rate reduction has not quite contributed to the increase in consumption demand that we might have hoped for. Now, there is no question about it, because GST is an indirect tax and it impacts the vast majority of our country's population. There will be some upward consumption demand. However, the reason why it's likely to be muted is the following. We know perfectly well that job growth has been limited, real wages have not been increasing, and we know perfectly well that household debt has been increasing. That has taken two forms. One is gold loans have increased dramatically, both in the rural areas as well as among the not so well off in the urban areas. And middle class people have actually borrowed from the banks personal loans. So the size of retail debt has actually gone beyond household incomes for the first time in about 30 years. That's the latest CLSA report that was just released. So, let's wait to see how much consumer demand will increase.
Right.
In the short run, we have to worry about the reduction in revenues. We will, in this year, the reduction in revenue will be barely half of the 48,000 crores, because half the year is already gone. It will take time for the demand to actually kick in, and we will wait to see. Yeah.
Okay. Monica ji, agree, disagree?
Look, the thing is that if you're not doing well, do you try to do everything possible to try and do better, or do you just wait for something to come from outside? So I think if you see what has happened in terms of trying to trigger consumption demand, the relief to the middle class in terms of income taxes, and now with the GST reform, I think the direction of the government is very clear. So yes, they did give a very attractive tax rate to the corporates. But to say that, that has not yielded results, so let's not do anything else, I think it's a defeatist sort of an attitude, ki kuch hoga nahi, kya farak padta hai. So I think the government is really trying to boost both private investment as well as consumption. And this, I would imagine that this is a good step to at least attempt this change. So the rationalization is good.
Absolutely.
I'm particularly happy about the reduction in cement and the consumer goods. So with more money in their pockets after that income tax break, and lower prices, which we are hoping that the corporate sector passes on, I see no reason for the upswing in consumption to start happening. And just remember that it's a very, very tricky global situation. So if you're whatever we do to get out of this, I think is worth the effort. We should continue to make that effort.
There was an assessment that one of the steps towards banning real money gaming and coming down so strictly was because there was a huge amount of money that was leaking into that, and that too from the rural India. This was beyond the top 27 cities, and huge amount of money, and a lot of them were getting into this debt trap. Another big issue where huge amount of money also leaked away was on these apps, international apps, the hackers, etc., who've also taken away nearly 50 to 60,000 crore rupees in the last 2 to 3 years, and that too from gullible people rurally. So there have been big leaks which the government has perhaps noticed a little too late, and it's affected in terms of the consumption pattern because the focus has shifted elsewhere. PK Basuji, you think GST reforms will bring them back, or how do you see things shaping up over the next 6-8 months?
First of all, the GST reform is a good long-term step. The important thing is that we've gone from 5 rates to 2. That is a big positive in itself, because it reduces the scope for evasion, it makes the GST regime much simpler, and it makes it easy to comply. So that is a big positive. In terms of the cyclical impact, absolutely. The substantial reduction is going to provide a further fillip to private consumption. Private consumption already has accelerated. We've just seen real GDP growing 7.8% in the latest quarter, and it is likely to grow even faster going forward. There is, of course, the fact that we now face a 50% tariff from the US, which means that we need to find other sources of growth to compensate. And the GST reform has come at precisely the right time in that sense, because it has provided a spur. Crisis has provided a spur to offset the impact of reduced exports to the US with a further boost to domestic consumption. What I would really like to see is India now pursuing the trade, the FTA deal with the European Union as quickly as possible, so that the negative impact of the US tariff can be further offset. But there is no doubt that India is the fastest growing economy in the world, and this set of measures, coupled with the fact that the personal income tax rate was cut this year, will ensure that private consumption will kick in even further. Now, with regard to the points about the public debt, we've seen globally a massive increases in public debt. India's increase in public debt over the 5 years, by the way, has occurred during the time where the US, the European Union, everybody has seen a massive increase. Compared to what they've seen, India's increase in public debt is much lower. The public debt to GDP is well under control relative to other countries, and India is on a glide path towards reducing the deficit. Now, this year's GST cuts, I think, will mean that achieving the fiscal deficit goal this year is going to be a little more challenging. Right. But if you get stronger growth in the economy, both real and nominal growth in the economy, then that provides you the basis for stronger revenue growth as well. Now, the other point is that we already have very low inflation. Inflation is at a 15-year low and is likely to come down further with the GST cuts, which basically means that the RBI will have the ability to further substantially reduce interest rates and provide an additional boost. So I think we are looking at the possibility of 9 to 10% real GDP growth. Quite frankly, I think the Indian economy should be aiming for 9 to 10% growth every year for the next 15 years, because that is the period during which our demographic dividend, we had the last leg of the demographic dividend to play out. We need a rapid employment growth. We need much faster GDP growth, and we need to basically provide labor-intensive manufacturing.
I was just about to. I was just about to come to
the US is
that.
a setback, but this, I think, the GST does a great
The
deal.
US is not so much of a setback into, if you look at the overall percentage of exports, and of course how much of it, as Piyush Goyal was also saying, out of $46 billion worth of, if it was $85 billion last year, more than half of it has already been achieved even now, even before the taxes kick in. But I think opening up more markets is important. But labor reforms, the reforms part of it, ease of doing business part of it, Monica ji, that is what is perhaps the issue, because there have to be more money has been put in the hands of the rural and the lower income class. Food security has been assured for nearly 80 crore people. There is more money an environment has been created for investment and for job creation and for manufacturing, but it's not happening. So there has to be a reason why. Is that being addressed, or is that the next step? Monica ji.
Anand, I'm afraid I'll have to leave.
Sir, after Monica ji, I'll come to you, Santosh ji. I was just trying to be
I'll leave in 1 minute. I have to. Another channel waiting for me.
Okay.
Forgive me.
I also need to leave.
So if you would yield, Monica ji, then we'll start with
absolutely.
Santosh.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Go ahead, please. Professor Mehrotra. Yeah.
So, forgive me, you'll have to put your question again.
No. So where are the labor reforms? The bills have been passed. They have not been notified.
Yeah. So,
those reforms have to.
My suspicion is, Anand, that those labor reforms are not being implemented because they are political. Obviously, they are politically sensitive. A lot of trade unions have opposed them, and before the elections, forthcoming elections, there are 2 or 3 of them. They are unlikely to be introduced. At which point, I'm sorry to say, I'll have to leave you. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
right.
you.
But most of these trade unions have not responded, have not protested when the states themselves have implemented 8 or 9 out of the 12 reforms suggested in the labor codes, despite it not being notified. So, Monica ji, let's take this forward. How will that? How are we looking at creating growth or manufacturing happening, because consumption has to also fuel in a certain amount of manufacturing. Manufacturing will generate jobs. That's another issue which has to trickle down. So this whole cyclical and a ripple effect has to be created, but the sharks don't seem to be biting. So even in 2025, they don't bite. When will they bite? Ji.
Yeah. I think the way that I see it, the problem right now is that the private sector is actually still waiting and watching to see which way the global winds blow. And also, I think they are waiting to see the impact of AI. So on one hand, labor is getting a double whammy, which is that you need skilled labor, right? And this skilled labor is not something that we have. The kind of skills that the corporate sector requires, that labor does not have that. And you have increasing mechanization. The robotics is just going to take over more and more of these jobs. So, our labor reforms will have to be done very carefully now from here on, to take into account the mechanization of the production, the manufacturing jobs, and try and get the labor skilled in things that only human beings can do. The plumbers, the drivers, the nurses, the physiotherapists. And for that, there is a huge demand globally because the world is aging. People have stopped having kids. The world is aging. So I think it's a crucial step right now, because we have the population, they need the work. Increasingly, that work is being taken away by mechanization. We will have to do a pivot. And this is, again, it's a good time to think about these things, because we are just, that biting off that new investment cycle is simply not happening. And I just want to make one more point. So you have a situation where basic food needs are looked after, with that 800 million people getting free food. The corporate sector has to offer something more. For somebody to leave his village or his tier 4, tier 3 town and come to a urban hovel. So for a key part of this growth story is going to be urban reform. So we have dysfunctional municipalities. The lived reality in urban areas is terrible. They come and live in hovels here. You will have to improve that to attract that person who's got his stomach full, he's got some livestock, why will he leave all that and come to a city where he doesn't have any community or a decent place to live? So we will have to really think through the layers of the reform and not just say that, oh, labor reform has been done. So this is a multi-layered problem, and it's also happening to us where we are in the middle of a storm constantly. You know, one thing doesn't get over, the second thing starts.
Yes. And
So,
perhaps in the
yeah.
last decade, we've not had as many black swan moments that we've had in the last century. So there are also those aspects and geopolitical aspects along with local aspects. But there is another theory which says, let's stop the migration from rural to urban. Let's take the industry down there. So let's use agri-based industries. Let's try and create more cooperatives. Let's try and create not just food security, but job security at the level where गांव का व्यक्ति गांव में रहे, but there is a certain urbanization that happens. P.K. Basuji, is that possible? How soon? How far are we from that? And are these timed right? These GST reforms, are these timed right?
The GST reforms are absolutely timed right, and I completely agree with what Monica said about the need for urban reform. You know, our urban bodies have no real ability to raise revenues of their own. They're dependent on the state governments. So urban governance is a complete disaster. In fact, it's non-existent, more or less. And we really need to address this. So your idea of some rural based industries is a good one. It's possible, but that cannot be the complete solution. We need to create urban spaces where rural workers can come, move in, and come to attractive jobs. You know, the productivity of the average productivity in labor-intensive manufacturing is about 3 to 4 times what the average productivity is in agriculture. So wages will consequently be 2, 3, 4 times higher, and that is what should attract them. But we definitely need to create good living conditions for them to move to those jobs. And really, you know, things like iPhone manufacturing, things like textiles, garments, shoes, toys on a massive scale is what is required in order to benefit from the demographic dividend and ensure that the demographic dividend is not wasted over the next 15 to 20 years. So absolutely, labor market reform is essential. But you know, I don't think we should get away from the fact that the GST reforms have come at an appropriate time. They have simplified the system, they have reduced rates, and that is very welcome under any circumstances.
Right. P.K. Basu, Monica Hallan, thank you so much for your time. Important observations that have been made not just by our panelists, but also Piyush Goyal in his conversation with Rahul Joshi here on the News18 network. We'll repeat that at later this evening around 11 p.m. But let's quickly go across to Dr. Arvind Mirvani, member of the Niti Aayog. Arvindji, namaste. We're speaking after a while. Thank you for your time. So a lot of relief for the middle class, but is it fair to the wealthy? While you're trying to help those who are not so able financially, but the financially able, the wealthy, to try and put some thing like automobiles and high-end luxury cars and bikes, etc., and some other things, along with, of course, tobacco and alcohol and cigarettes, etc. Isn't it a little socialist / communist to try and show that the wealthy have to pay more and they will be taxed more?
So firstly, I kind of feel very uncomfortable with the term sin goods, because there are basically 2 or 3 types of items in what is being popularly called by this word. One are what I called unhealthy goods, or you can call it a health tax. And this is a standard thing in economics of taxation, what we call negative externalities. So those are basically, the best example is tobacco and related products. That is not I don't look at it as a sin thing. I look at it as a health giving thing to discourage people. The second part is high income elasticity goods, which are necessary for ensuring that the revenue elasticity of the GST is positive, is more than 1, that as the GDP increases, the revenue with this increases faster than that, and those are things like large cars. I don't think the tax has been increased because there used to be a whole bunch of cesses which will cease to apply at some point if they already not which have been abolished. I'm not sure, I have to read the fine print,
Right.
But if they haven't gone now, they'll go later. So the effective tax burden on the large car is not increased.
Right.
So that's not a correct interpretation. Just because it's gone from 28 to 40, if the offsetting cesses are gone, the effective rate is lower. So that is second category. And third category, a small amount maybe like betting and gambling, which I guess you could call as a sin good, is also being taxed as 40.
Yes. Your thoughts on whether this will further and spur Make in India? Is that what Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also implying when he says Swadeshi, domestic consumption, domestic manufacturing will go up?
So if you look at the structure of the economy, something like, and again these numbers are flexible depending on exactly where you look, somewhere between 75 and the 85% of the economy is informal. So both the consumption and the production is informal, because you can't produce, you're producing means somebody is buying, right? They're not just producing to dump them. So this is something we often forget, because we focus only on the 15-20% of the formal sector, which most of us are, including myself. So I'm not criticizing anybody. So what the PM is saying is that we have to give a lot more attention. There are lots of things in which quality is improving and further can be improved in the informal sector, and here I bring in other things like the quality of job skilling, etc., the Vishwakarma scheme. So it's all related, but specifically to your point, Atmanirbhar and Swadeshi, he has made very clear, even in Atmanirbhar, that we are talking not about protection, high cost, low quality. We want a Swadeshi which is higher quality and cost competitive. So that is the aim. The difficulty is there are so many things need to be done, which we are doing one by one, the infrastructure improvement, etc. But to come back to Swadeshi, it is just saying that at least go and look again at the products. There are so many handicrafts. I have had visitors from the US. When I show them some of these handicrafts, which are really very cheap here, and they say, wow, this is great, because you don't see that stuff out there. Okay, so what I think the PM's idea is not, he doesn't believe in forcing. It's not a question of protection or forcing people, but it's just to open their eyes, go and try. There are some very good items produced by the handicraft sector or the local textile sector or whatever. So that's the idea.
True, and Piyush Goyal ji also spoke about the same, that to try and create a domestic consumption market to offset perhaps the impact of the Trump tariffs on exporters, along with the fact that realize that there is so much more quality and great stuff, like you said, which is being made in Bharat, and if that can also be supplied to the world, that just creates more avenues for earnings in business. Finally, sir, let me ask you this. What do you think will be the measurable impact on Bharatiya economy in the near term, and also perhaps in the mid-term, because of these GST reforms?
Right. So there are three things which will happen, but it's very difficult to give you an exact time frame. They have different lags, but let me list them out and then perhaps give a rough. So the immediate thing is obvious, which everybody is discussing, is the effect on consumption. So as you know, people have been saying urban consumption has been a little low compared to historical percentages and so on, shares. And so clearly the most immediate impact will be on the consumption and consumption distribution. The second one is that as this consumption picks up, for example, in consumer durables and cars, you would start seeing an increase in investment happening. And the third, which is intangible but will start happening immediately, but its effects are hard to time or to give a time frame, which is the fundamental improvement because of simplification of the system, where disputes etc. go down, voluntary compliance goes up, there are more people will come into, more producers who are on the borderline will come into the system, because the tariff, the GST rate is only 5% in many of these items. So that will have a huge improvement effect on productivity and efficiency over time, but it's the most difficult to measure and kind of give a time frame for. So all these three things will happen, let's say over the next 6 months to 2 years.
Right. Right. Arvindji, thank you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for speaking with us and giving us a perspective. So in the near term, there should be some relief for the Aam Aadmi and also some impetus to try and tide over what the impact of the Trump tariffs could be on exporters. But more importantly, this is a drive, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi said, towards Bharat becoming more Atmanirbhar, and for domestic consumption to also be increased, or to give it a spur, so that domestic manufacturing also improves. So multiple points. We're going to wind up on that note. The conversation continues on perhaps the most monumental reforms post-independence, as Piyush Goyalji also said. We call it a wrap on this edition of The Right Stand. Here, coming to you live from the CNN News 18 Primetime Studios, brought to you by Schneider Electric Smart Home Solutions. Thank you for watching. Namaste.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
In a landmark GST reform effective September 22nd, the government has simplified tax slabs to just two, 5% and 18%. It eases the financial burden on consumers as far as everyday goods, everyday needs are concerned. Essential items like hair oil, shampoo, dairy products, snacks, several of your medical devices will now attract only 5%. Critical medicines and health insurance are completely exempt of GST. This move is being hailed as a gift to the common man, especially in the run-up to the festival season. Farmers, women, youth, MSMEs, the middle class, all will now get a massive relief when this comes into effect on the first day of Navratri. It's an auspicious beginning as per the government as far as GST 2.0 goes. Prime Minister Modi has called this next generation GST reform. It's designed to boost spending and economic growth as well. In fact, the economy is projected to gain about 48,000 crore rupees from the renewed and reformed GST.
Common man and middle class items में there is a complete reduction. Reduction from 18 or from 12 to 5%. I list out those items, all of whom have come to 5% from either 18 or from 12. Reduction of GST from 5% to nil. 5 से 0 में जाने वाले items indicate कर रहा हूँ. Ultra high temperature milk, the UHT milk, chena or paneer, all the Indian breads will see nil rate. So roti kisi ke upar bhi, chapati or roti or paratha or whatever it is, they all come to nil. Reduction of GST from 12% or from 18% to 5%. इसमें food items बहुत सारे हैं, नमकीन से भुजिया है, sauces है, pasta है, instant noodles है. Exemption of GST on all individual health insurance policies, including family floater policies and policies for senior citizens, and reinsurance thereof to make insurance affordable for the common man and increase the insurance coverage in the country.
Yesterday's GST reforms are a step in the direction of ensuring an Atmanirbhar Bharat, an India which is self-sufficient, self-reliant, an India whose supply chains are self-reliant, an India that cares for every Indian. 140 crore Indians coming together with the collective resolve to make India Viksit Bharat by 2047, a developed and prosperous nation where everybody gets opportunity, where everybody becomes a participant of India's inclusive and sustainable growth story.
It's a matter of great joy for all of us that Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji has decided to reduce the GST rates for practically everything that is used in the lives of our middle class families and our low income families. Starting from food items to items which are used in day-to-day life, to students, items which are required by our students, to the items which are used in our homes, whether it is consumer electronics, small cars, scooters, everything is now going to see a lower GST rate.
कटाई थ्रैशिंग के उपकरण आदि पर भी टैक्स को काफ़ी घटा दिया गया है। इससे कृषि से आधारित अर्थव्यवस्था को एक नई मजबूती मिलेगी। घर के निर्माण में काम में आने वाली सामग्रियों को पर भी टैक्स दरों में कम कर दिया गया है। इससे आम नागरिकों पर वित्तीय बोझ तो कम होगा, साथ ही देश की अर्थव्यवस्था भी मजबूत होगी। यूपीए सरकार जीएसटी लागू ही नहीं कर पाई थी क्योंकि राज्यों को तब की कांग्रेस सरकार पर भरोसा ही नहीं था। उल्टे कांग्रेस सरकार वैट के माध्यम से गरीब जनता और व्यापारियों पर डाके डालती, बड़े पैमाने पर टैक्स चोरी को भी गुंजाइश बनी रहती थी।
Now, what exactly are the key takeaways as far as GST 2.0 goes? There were 4 slabs initially. Now there are only going to be 2 slabs for most items, which is 5% and 18%. Of course, there is a 40% much higher tax on what the government has called sin goods. The GST Council has done away with the 12 and 28% GST tax slabs altogether. This 40% tax on sin goods will apply to more expensive goods like helicopters, like yachts. Some cigars will also be under this. Tobacco and cigarettes will also be included under what the government terms are as sin goods. As far as the health sector goes, there is a big relief because there is no GST anymore on life and health insurance premiums. Several life-saving drugs also now are completely exempt from GST. In fact, the new regime is going to be kicking off from September 22nd, which is the first day of Navratri, which is believed to be an auspicious period. Also, the timing of it, given that it just about begins the festival season, first with Navratri, then Dashera, and of course Diwali, that will follow the month after. So how exactly does this help the Aam Aadmi, the consumer, you and I? How does it help our daily needs?
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
In a landmark GST reform effective September 22nd, the government has simplified tax slabs to just 2. 5% and 18%. It eases the financial burden on consumers as far as everyday goods, everyday needs are concerned. Essential items like hair oil, shampoo, dairy products, snacks, several of your medical devices will now attract only 5%. Critical medicines and health insurance are completely exempt of GST. This move is being hailed as a gift to the common man, especially in the run-up to the festival season. Farmers, women, youth, MSMEs, the middle class, all will now get a massive relief when this comes into effect on the first day of Navratri. It's an auspicious beginning as per the government as far as GST 2.0 goes. Prime Minister Modi has called this next generation GST reform is designed to boost spending and economic growth as well. In fact, the economy is projected to gain about 48,000 crore rupees from the renewed and reformed GST.
Common man and middle class items में there is a complete reduction. Reduction from 18 or from 12 to 5%. I list out those items, all of whom have come to 5% from either 18 or from 12. Reduction of GST from 5% to nil. 5 से 0 में जाने वाले items indicate कर रहा हूँ. Ultra high temperature milk, the UHT milk, chena or paneer, all the Indian breads will see nil rate. So roti kisi ke upar bhi, chapati or roti or paratha or whatever it is, they all come to nil. Reduction of GST from 12% or from 18% to 5%. इसमें फूड आइटम्स बहुत सारे हैं, नमकीन से भुजिया है, सॉसेस है, पास्ता है, इंस्टेंट नूडल्स है. Exemption of GST on all individual health insurance policies, including family floater policies and policies for senior citizen, and reinsurance thereof to make insurance affordable for the common man and increase the insurance coverage in the country.
Yesterday's GST reforms are a step in the direction of ensuring an Atmanirbhar Bharat, an India which is self-sufficient, self-reliant, an India whose supply chains are self-reliant, an India that cares for every Indian. 140 crore Indians coming together.
CNN News 18 Primetime Studio, presented by Schneider Electric Smart Home Solutions.
Good evening, you're watching Brass Tacks with me, Zakir Jacob. We're coming to you live from the CNN News 18 Primetime Studio, brought to you by Schneider Electric Smart Home Solutions. So, GST Council undertook a massive reform by reducing the tax slabs for GST to just 2 from the earlier 4. Right now, the GST slabs, effective 22nd of September, will just be 2 slabs, that's 5% and 18%. Most goods will be tariffed at either of these 2 slabs at 5%. In fact, most everyday items are being tariffed at 5%, and slightly luxurious goods are being tariffed at 18%. There's also a third slab, which is the 40% for sin goods. I'll come to that in 1 second. But this is